Times like this, I just need to have tissue attached to me. It has been very difficult to continue to live without Sherri. Sherri was like the bridge to kind of pull us all together.
And I want you to know that Sherri was the best professional in the world. She was the best wife that anybody could ever have. And she was the best sister, daughter. She wanted to make everybody happy.
You have to understand that was the love of his life. And trying to deal with that grief is devastating.
She married the man of her dreams, but his past never let go. In 1986, Sherri Rasmussen was murdered. The case went cold for 23 years. Then DNA whispered the truth, and a cop's perfect cover shattered. You know who killed her? The cold case that exposed a killer in uniform. Watch now. The morning sun filtered through the windows of a townhome nestled in the quiet hills of Van Nuys, California. The year was 1986, and for most people it was just another weekday. But inside the home of Sherri Rasmussen and John Retton, something unspeakable had happened. Sherri's father, Nels Rasmussen, would never forget the sound of the phone call. A soft, detached voice from the other end. Words that didn't make sense at first. Then, clarity. Sherri was dead. Just 3 months earlier, Sherri Rasmussen, 29, had walked down the aisle with the man she believed was the love of her life, John Retton, tall, kind, quiet, and thoughtful. Their wedding photos were picture-perfect. She in lace and pearls, he with a half-nervous, half-adoring smile. Sherri was a hospital director, ambitious, bright, elegant. Everyone who knew her spoke of her warmth and drive. She wasn't just beautiful. She was brilliant. She made people feel like they mattered. Her new husband, John, had a solid job in aerospace engineering, and together they were beginning the kind of life people dream of. Cozy evenings, career goals, weekend barbecues. But someone else was watching. Someone who couldn't move on. Stephanie Lazarus had known John long before Sherri. They'd met in college at UCLA, gone on dates, even slept together off and on for years. But to John, it was always casual. To Stephanie, it was never over. She had joined the LAPD shortly after college, rising steadily through the ranks. Athletic, confident and precise. A textbook success story in uniform, but there was a crack in the armor. Even after John married Sherri, Stephanie kept popping up. She showed up unannounced at his office. She brought him homemade cookies. She asked if he was happy, really happy. At least once, she came by the condo and found Sherri alone. Sherri told her family about that visit. She said a female cop, John's ex, had walked in without warning. That the woman had been intense, passive-aggressive, that she'd said things like, "If I can't have him, no one can." Sherri was shaken, but she didn't want to be dramatic. She trusted John. She thought it would blow over. It didn't. On the morning of February 24th, 1986, John left early for work. Sherri had planned to go to a meeting at the hospital, but never showed. By late afternoon, her parents grew worried. John tried calling, no answer. When he came home that evening, he found her dead, beaten, bloodied, shot 3 times in the chest. The living room was a mess. Furniture overturned, shattered glass, signs of a struggle. Her body was sprawled near the fireplace, a bite mark on her forearm. A quilt pulled halfway over her, almost like someone tried to cover her shame. Police called it a botched burglary. A few valuables were missing. The sliding glass door had been smashed. It looked messy enough, but her parents didn't buy it. Nels Rasmussen stood in the hallway and told the detectives, "Look at the husband's ex. The female cop. She threatened my daughter." They dismissed it. No, this was just a break-in gone wrong." And so the file was stamped. Cold case. Stephanie Lazarus went back to work, gun on hip, badge shining, and Sherri's family buried their daughter with more questions than answers. But evidence never truly disappears, and Stephanie had left behind something she didn't even realize. By the time the calendar rolled over to 2009, Sherri Rasmussen had been gone for over 2 decades. Her grave lay quiet in a California cemetery, weathered now by time, the stones softened around the edges. But her father, Nels, still visited often, still said her name out loud, still felt in his gut that justice had been buried right alongside her. For years, he'd written letters to the LAPD, to the district attorney, to anyone who would listen. "There's no way it was a burglary," he said. "Look into the female police officer, Stephanie something. My daughter feared her." But no one listened. At least, not yet. Inside, the LAPD robbery homicide cold case unit, 2 detectives, Jim Nuttall and Pete Barber, were quietly reviewing old files with fresh eyes. The Rasmussen case file had collected dust, but the crime scene photos, they didn't sit right. The room had signs of rage, not theft. The missing items, too few, too staged. And the bite mark on Sherri's arm, left by her attacker, had never been processed with modern DNA methods. That was about to change. They sent the bite mark swab to the crime lab, and what came back was DNA, a clear, usable female profile. Not male, not random, not Russ Faria, not a burglar. A woman had killed Sherri. That changed everything. The detectives narrowed it down. Only a handful of women had been persons of interest, however briefly back in the day. Among them, Stephanie Lazarus. The file said almost nothing about her, just a single note. Ex-girlfriend of husband, LAPD officer, no known involvement. But the DNA didn't lie. They started digging into her past, and what they found? Alarming. Stephanie had worked her way up through the LAPD ranks. By 2009, she was a detective in the art theft detail, highly respected, decorated, and trusted. She was married now, had a daughter, was known to colleagues as a straight shooter, but then came the diary entries, the interview tapes, the bizarre statements she'd made over the years about crazy relationships and jealousy that made her do stupid things. The detectives couldn't go public, couldn't call her in. She was LAPD. They needed to be discreet. So they followed her, watched her daily routine, waited until she tossed a drink cup at a food court trash can. A fast food cup with a plastic straw, saliva intact. They bagged it, rushed it to the lab, and the results were unmistakable. Stephanie Lazarus's DNA matched the bite mark on Sherri Rasmussen's arm. The killer was a cop, a decorated active-duty LAPD detective, a woman who had smiled, shaken hands, filed paperwork, all while hiding a murder for 23 years. Now came the hardest part, bringing her in without tipping her off. It was a bright June morning in 2009 when Detective Stephanie Lazarus got a call she thought nothing of. 2 fellow officers from the Robbery Homicide Division had a case. Something about stolen art. Since Stephanie worked in the art theft detail, they asked if she could swing by for a quick consult. She agreed without hesitation. She even brought her gun, her badge, and her casual confidence. She had no idea she was walking into a trap. The interrogation room at LAPD headquarters was set up like any other. Table, 2 chairs, audio and video recording, rolling quietly. In the background, Stephanie sat down, relaxed, chatted politely. She sipped coffee. She smiled. She had no lawyer. The detectives started small. "Hey, thanks for coming in, Steph. We just wanted to pick your brain on something. Appreciate your help." She leaned back, comfortable. Then they pivoted. "So, you knew a guy named John Rutan, right?" She blinked. "Sure. College. We dated. Long time ago." "You knew his wife, Sherri?" A pause. "I mean, not really. I may have met her once. I don't really remember." The detectives glanced at each other. They circled her slowly, asking more about her relationship with John, how long they dated, if it was serious, if it ever overlapped with his marriage. She shifted a bit, smiled awkwardly. "I mean, yeah, Maybe I was still friends with him, but it wasn't like that. Then they asked the key question. Do you remember where you were on February 24th, 1986? She hesitated. That's a long time ago. Because Sherri Rasmussen was murdered that day. Her expression changed. The air grew heavier. You're not saying I had anything to do with that, are you? That's insane. But her voice cracked, her eyes darted, and her breathing quickened. Look, she said, this is getting weird. You're not recording this, right? They were. You don't think I did this, do you? Silence. Then one detective leaned in and calmly said, We know you did. Stephanie stood up suddenly, put her hands on her hips, paced. I need to go. I need to get an attorney. But it was too late. Officers waiting just outside the door moved in. They took her gun, read her rights. A woman who had once worn the badge with honor now stood in handcuffs. The room she once ruled, now her cage. The story broke within hours. LAPD. Detective arrested for 1986. Murdered officers who had known her for decades stared at their screens in disbelief. But for Nels and Loretta Rasmussen, it was the call they had waited 23 years for. We always knew, Nels said. We just never gave up. The city of Los Angeles buzzed with disbelief as news of the arrest rippled through headlines and households alike. A veteran detective, an unsolved murder, a decades-long deception finally unmasked. But for the Rasmussen family, this wasn't sensational. It was sacred. After 23 years, they weren't chasing headlines. They were chasing peace. The trial of Stephanie Lazarus began in 2012, inside a packed Los Angeles courtroom. She entered in a dark blazer and soft makeup, a stark contrast to the mugshot that had circulated weeks earlier. Gone was the badge. Gone was the bravado. Now she was just a woman accused of beating and murdering her ex-boyfriend's wife in a jealous rage, and hiding behind a uniform ever since. The prosecution laid it bare. They painted Stephanie as a woman consumed by rejection, a woman who couldn't let go of John Rutan, a woman who resented the bright, capable hospital director who had taken her man. They showed the jury the crime scene, not just the photos, but the chaos. Furniture overturned, vase shattered, signs of a prolonged, intimate struggle. They introduced the bite mark, and the DNA match, and the surveillance operation that led to her arrest. But what truly chilled the courtroom was when prosecutors revealed the handwritten journal entries recovered from Lazarus's belongings. Pages filled with longing, jealousy, bitterness. One entry, dated just weeks before the murder, read, I see them together and wonder what she has that I don't. Why did he choose her? I would never hurt him, but I could hurt her. The defense tried to push back. They called the DNA inconclusive. They said Lazarus was being targeted because she was a cop, that the crime scene was too messy, too sloppy for someone with law enforcement training. But the jury wasn't swayed. The prosecutors reminded them this wasn't the work of a stranger. This was the work of someone who came prepared, angry, and intimate with the victim. A woman who once told Sherri, to her face, if I can't have him, no one can. And then came John Rutan. He took the stand with trembling hands, tears in his eyes, a man who once juggled two women, one casual, one forever, and had no idea the first was quietly plotting against the second. I never imagined she was capable of this, he told the court. I thought we were just over. I didn't know she was still watching us. In March 2012, the jury returned with a verdict, guilty of first-degree murder. Stephanie Lazarus, once a respected cop, was sentenced to 27 years to life in prison. She didn't cry, she didn't speak, she only stared forward, perhaps realizing, finally, the truth had outrun her lies. Outside, Nels and Loretta Rasmussen stood before a sea of microphones. "We fought for 26 years to give our daughter a voice," Nell said, "and today she was heard." The trial was over, the verdict had been read, and in the halls of justice, for a fleeting moment, silence spoke the loudest. But even with a guilty sentence and a killer behind bars, the echo of Sherri Rasmussen's life rang louder than any courtroom gavel ever could. She had been a rising star in the medical field, already a director of critical care at just 29. She had dreams of transforming patient care, of mentoring young nurses, of someday becoming a mother. Instead, her story became a case file, a botched burglary, a crime explained away with laziness and denial, and yet she endured, because of a father who refused to forget, because of DNA that refused to degrade, because of truth that refused to stay buried. Sherri Rasmussen became the reason cold cases matter. John Rutan was never the same. After the trial, he gave just one public interview. He sat stiffly, hands folded, voice heavy. "I've spent decades trying to rewrite the past in my head, trying to undo the small choices that led Stephanie to my wife's door." He paused. "But no matter how hard I try, I can't fix what happened. I can only say this: Sherri was pure light, and she didn't deserve to be remembered for how she died. She deserves to be remembered for how she lived." Stephanie Lazarus now lives inside a California women's correctional facility. No badge, no gun, no more power. In prison, she is inmate Nabra X231206. Just another number. Sentenced for a life. She took in rage, in jealousy, in silence. She thought she could outsmart time. But time has a way of talking. The lesson of Sherri's case is painfully simple. Sometimes evil wears a smile, sometimes it wears a uniform, and sometimes it's the one knocking on your door, saying they just want to talk. But justice doesn't always need to run. Sometimes it waits, patient, quiet, watching, and when it finally arrives, it asks just one question. "You know who killed her?"